Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Elle McBride. Elle is a globally recognized trauma-informed havening techniques practitioner, trainer, and founder of House of Delta. Since 2016, she has dedicated herself to helping others heal and thrive using neuroscience-based tools. Her own transformative experience with havening techniques inspired her to share this innovative approach with individuals seeking to break free from trauma, stress, and limiting beliefs. With a background in corporate training and development, Elle blends professional expertise with personal insight to create an empowering learning environment. She is also a sought-after speaker, writer, and facilitator, regularly hosting workshops, retreats, and online training programs to inspire and educate others. Elle's story is one of personal transformation, resilience, and the power of self-belief. So I cannot wait to dive into this conversation today. So with that, Elle, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you today?
Ash, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. And hello, everybody that's listening and tuning in.
Yay! Yes, hello. Elle, I would love to know, let's dive straight in. Where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
I am based on the Gold Coast in Australia. And an average day for me can look like anything. I usually wake up, I take my dog for a walk, which also files into my favorite things that I like to do. And then I work with clients. I'm doing online things. I see people in person and online. So my practice is really tangible in that way. And then, honestly, being with my dog is the funnest part of my day. But then having dinner parties and cooking for people that I love is really like where my joy comes from.
I love that. Okay, I have to ask because I am an absolute crazy dog mum.
Mm-hmm.
What is your dog? What's its name? Tell me everything.
My boy is just turned 4 and he is a Chihuahua, a long hair Chihuahua.
Oh my God, you have to send me a photo. What's his name?
His name is Jaira. Yeah.
Oh, what a little sweetheart.
Yeah.
I have Frank. He's 5 years old. He's a Brussels Griffon. He's literally sleeping beside my feet right now. I just got back from being away for 6 weeks. And when I saw him, I burst into tears. It was such an insane reaction. I've never done that before, but I just, oh my God, they're just like our worlds.
They really are.
It's a really special kind of love, isn't it? And I love what you said just then about how you find so much happiness in the simple act of walking him. You know, I was just going for a walk earlier this morning and it's a beautiful winter's day here in Melbourne and the sun is shining. And I had this immense wave of gratitude wash over me. And I realized in that moment that I was just as happy doing that exact thing, walking Frank in the park in my local area, as I had been 3 weeks prior sitting on a beach in Greece. Isn't it crazy? Like we're always looking for the externals and the big things and working towards, the next holiday or the next achievement. And yet we have access to that fulfillment right here, right now. It was just, I loved it. It was such a good moment.
Yeah, that's how I try to live. If I can enjoy the mundane, then those big, amazing things. I've done a lot of travel myself. And so, I know what it's like to sit on a beach in Greece. But when we can enjoy those simple things, those extra additionals just have a little bit more sparkle in them sometimes. Yeah. Different seasons call for different things.
Absolutely. Now, Elle, I've asked you to bring in a photo today, and that photo is from a time in your life when you were hiding behind a smile. So you were presenting one version of yourself to the external world, but internally you were really struggling. So could you please describe for our audience who are perhaps listening along and not watching the video? I'm going to bring the photo up on the screen, but for those who are listening, could you please describe what we're looking at here in this photo and then tell us a little bit more about what was going on for you at that time in your life?
Yeah, for sure. So that was in September 2016. For me, I was actually visiting the Gold Coast at this time. I wasn't living here and I'd been in a really unpleasant relationship. There was a lot of narcissistic traits on his side. And for myself, had just become really a shell of myself. It wasn't his fault. I take full responsibility in the healing that I hadn't actually done. And the world was a different place then. We didn't have Google. We didn't have ChatGPT. We didn't have access. I was in a small country town. So even seeing a counselor or a therapist was really quite difficult. I had tried to kind of seek out some healing modalities where I could, and some of them just made me feel a lot worse. That photo was actually taken a few days before I met a woman named Karen Hedges who introduced me to havening techniques, and it really was just the lowest point for me. I had been experiencing very complex PTSD for 3.5 years, and after a near-death experience that I had had, and I think it just, even though I'd been diagnosed with depression at 16 years old and I had really struggled with a lot of things, I always had this like little light inside. But I really felt that when this photo in particularly was taken, all my hope had been drained out. And, you know, a little bit probably more of that story. The reason why I was visiting the Gold Coast was I'd been in this relationship. The relationship wasn't even the thing. It was who I was. And that's what led me into that relationship. I had lived overseas. I'd traveled the world. I'd lived in Melbourne. I'd lived in Canberra, Townsville, the Gold Coast. I moved around a lot. I used to run away. I was constantly in a flight response. And I happened to have booked tickets to a festival called Burning Seed. It's like the Australian version of Burning Man. And I'd been a couple of years prior and had a psychedelic experience and kind of was in like a phase of manifesting and, you know, trying to be my own creator, I suppose, of my reality, and was just deeply lost. And so I thought, I'm going to go back to that festival and I'm going to take as many drugs as I possibly can. And I'm going to have an encounter with God and he's going to tell me what to do. Because when I'd had a near-death experience, I'd had an encounter with God. And so I was like, that's my path. That's what I'm going to do. And so I booked tickets to this festival. But before the festival, I'm like, I'm going to go to the Gold Coast for a weekend and see maybe I want to live there. Then I'm going to go to Melbourne and see if I want to live there again. Then I'll go to the festival, take all the drugs, get my answer, and then I don't need to really think about it. For the next week, I can just go on this wild adventure and then I'll have my answer. So even though I didn't necessarily know what anxiety was, I was like, I'm just going to put all of my feelings and emotions aside and go and live my life and just run away, which is was always my go-to. So I'm on the Gold Coast, staying with a girlfriend, and I receive an email to say that the festival had been cancelled due to flooding.
No.
Now, this festival was like held in the middle of nowhere out like near Dubbo, if anybody knows it. It's quite dry land. And so the festival's cancelled and all my hope just vanished. I remember I drank like 3 bottles of wine, smoked a packet of cigarettes, and was like, how? Like that's what I was counting on happening. And so that was probably, like, when we talk about that photo, that was probably that day, if not the day after, that I'd found out that festival had been cancelled. And then the following day, so 2 days after the festival was cancelled, I walked into a coffee shop, sat down and was having my coffee and was introduced to Karen Hedges. And she said, would you like to be a case study of this thing called havening? And there was just something about her that I was like, I've tried so many things, you know, it sounds like a placebo, but sure, I'll give it a go. And I said, but I'm leaving in, 2 days. She said, well, how about tomorrow? So we ended up having that session, and what I had been experiencing very complex PTSD over, which had been, I had a near-death experience. A month later, I was in another body of water. So the near-death experience was a drowning. A month later, I was in a spa bath and had a panic attack. And in that panic attack, associated into trauma in my childhood, which I couldn't work out. Is it true? Is it not true? Is it real? Is it not real? Was it this? Was it that? Was I that age? Was I that? Was it this person? It was just a constant spiral for years. I lived in this. And all of a sudden, within 15 minutes of this session, it just shifted. It wasn't there. I wasn't looking through this fog. The session went for like 2.5 hours, but that initial response was complete freedom. And I then went to Melbourne, and then I went back to my hometown, which is Bateman's Bay on the south coast, if anybody knows it. It's a beautiful little boating and fishing camping town. All right. So yeah, then 6 weeks later, after moving to the Gold Coast, I was then studying in this modality, and I didn't believe like I belonged in that room. I was like, I need the therapist. I can't become the therapist. But it just felt so natural for me to be there. It truly did. And I had to become my own client. I was havening, left, right, and center on anything that I could. And really just to create this change within myself before anybody else, become a product. I never thought that I would be here, nearly 10 years later, supporting people in the capacity that I do and training so many people now of all different walks of life. It's just such an honor and a privilege. But yeah, it was a really big journey to then get to this place and be my own client, and then now supporting thousands annually through this as well.
That's amazing. I'm going to ask you, because I feel like many people listening along right now are thinking and scratching their heads going, what on earth is havening? So let's just pause there for a second. Would you mind explaining what this technique actually is?
Of course. Havening techniques is formerly known as amygdala depotentiation. So if there's anybody out there that loves neuroscience, you'll know these terms. So havening is a psychosensory therapy based in neuroscience. And essentially it breaks down the neural pathways of traumatic encoding. So it allows individuals to live more fully in the present. And so we're applying a very simple touch. We're using imagination and then intentional distraction techniques. So if you've heard of techniques like EFT or EMDR, it'd be very similar into that category as a psychosensory therapy. And so for us, we are using a very gentle stroking motion of the face, the hands or the arms. And we know that we're creating permanent change. Havening is heavily backed by neuroscience to understand what we're doing to those neural pathways and changing the way that those AMPA receptors respond in the transition of that.
And so somebody who perhaps like a client of yours who's coming to see you for an in-person session, let's say, do you take them through, like how long does that go for? Is there any speech involved, or is it all just physical touch?
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Great question. So people will come to see me for all different things, and sessions can be, quick with half an hour or 2 hours. It can really depend. My sessions are usually an hour and a half to 2, but I've sat with people on a plane and they're experiencing anxiety, and I've been able to teach them to what we call self-haven. So it's two minutes and they're able to completely shift the way that they're feeling. So it can really just depend on the circumstances. There's so much freedom with havening. You can literally haven anywhere. So we have self-havening where even if a client comes to see me, they might not feel comfortable with touch. So they'll facilitate it themselves, or I will facilitate it for them, as well as, the how does it work? There is a little bit of talking for sure. But what I love most about it, especially being a practitioner, is a lot of my clients want to work content free. And they might share a snippet of it, but even in my own experience, when I first sat down in that chair, I was riddled with shame, and I didn't even know if I had the words. And when I sat down in that chair, Karen asked me, so why are we here? And I just burst into tears, and I only said 3 words: when I was. And a big ab reaction, I remember just like there was snot, there was sweat, there was everything. And she just held that space for me so beautifully. And that was all I had to share. 15 minutes later, I had this complete freedom. I could talk about it. There was no more shame. So that's the same for my clients now as well, is that, and, my students' clients, I now teach people. So I'm reading all their case studies that they're sending as a part of their certification. And I'm like, this is just so cool. I work with children, I work with men, with women, with big footballers. Like there's just like from all different walks of life, people that have been told they'll never conceive a child naturally. There's like 12 babies on the planet now that, their parents are crediting this journey of havening techniques. That's just from my clients, not the global community that we have.
I remember the first time I was introduced to the technique, and it was in rehab actually. And it was just that, they called it a butterfly hug. And so we crossed our arms and we did that rubbing action. For those who aren't watching right now, I'm doing it. And I remember, and I'm just feeling it even right now, that sense of safety that washes over you. And it's that real For me, it's that real physical, tangible way that I can nurture my inner child. You know, we often talk about the inner child, and it's like, okay, well, I'll try to talk to her more kindly and acknowledge her needs, but it's that real tangible, physical touch. And just as you were describing, I've never had it done physically to me by a practitioner, but how beautiful that experience must be just to be able to allow someone to hold you, because so many of us are moving through this world carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. And I just thought how special and how beautiful that, yeah, it's
Yeah,
just delicious.
it is.
Elle, can we go back? Because, you know, in my experience, in the hundreds of people that I've spoken to on this podcast and offline, people that get into this kind of work really do have a story. And you've already shared a small amount of that, the fact that at 16 you were diagnosed with depression. So if you feel comfortable to do so, I would love to ask you to perhaps share a little bit more about your childhood, and if there was anything significant, maybe any particular experiences or memories that shaped the adult that you became and the journey through your mental health within that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, life can be argued. Does it start in utero? I believe it does. And so for myself, I happened to be born in to parents that had just lost a child. To kind of recap, I had a brother who was 4 years old, and then a brother who was born. He was alive for a full day, and then he passed away. Then less than a year later, I arrive. So my mum had just gone through a pregnancy. He was born, Josh was born, and then passed away that following day. And then less than a year later, I arrive, healthy, happy. But, I lived with many stories, and stories that I told myself, lies that I had believed about myself, that it shouldn't have been me, that Josh should have been alive, that,
Mm.
I should have been a boy, that, my dad would have enjoyed playing more with me because I would have been into motorbikes if I was a boy. Just like these outrageous lies that I believed. But I always felt so loved. I never questioned if I was loved by my parents. When I look back, my parents did such an incredible job, but their grief that they didn't have tools to work through. And, it was a very complex time. The 80s was, the information that we have now wasn't available then. And when I think about it, and when my mum shares stories with me, I just think, whoa, that's just so incredibly traumatic. I just had my birthday last week, and, she tends to tell me this story about when she found out that they were pregnant with me. They thought that I'd wait for Christmas Day to tell the rest of the family that, we're pregnant. So August, Josh passed away. By December, they were 4 months pregnant, and they told the family on Christmas Day. And my mum said, you could have heard a pin drop. She said, no one knew what to say. They were all grieving as well. It was a very big loss in a small country town, and, everybody knew, and people don't know how to handle grief. And so I really had this warped perception of my own identity. So I think growing up, I never questioned again, if I was loved. It was just the comparison to somebody that wasn't even alive, that was never alive. And it would always be my birthday on the 1st of July, and then my brother's on the 6th of August, which is tomorrow when we're recording this. And, it was just always this place of if I wasn't here, it would be my birthday, and then mum would be like, oh, Josh would have been 12, Josh would have been 13. And it was so beautiful, to know that I had this angel in heaven, and that I could go out and look at the stars, and the brightest star in the sky was my brother. And, my parents absolutely did their best, but unfortunately I just had this internal dialogue of not good enough. And my parents separated when I was 11, and, that was really quite difficult, especially in a small town. My parents were like the high school sweethearts. Everyone thought they'd be together forever. And, they were really incredible throughout their whole separation. They're still best friends. It's really nice that we can have, all step parents and parents together. And I've got half brothers, and we all get along really well, which is such a blessing. I know it's not the case for everybody. But I think even an amicable, not that it was, when it first happened, we've had to all work on that. But
Of course.
for the most part, it was really amicable, which is quite confusing, So I wasn't really allowed to have my anger or my frustrations, or I was sent to look after my little brother during that season. And so it was just an odd time, my teenage years. My first love, I wasn't allowed to talk to him or see him. And so there was a lot of like sneaking out and not a lot of safety with, being able to talk about love. And so I think that's why in my life I tended to go for like the naughty one, like the naughty guys, and being attracted to people that didn't necessarily treat me very well, because I didn't have this GPS of what was right and wrong. And it took me a really long time. I was placed on antidepressants at 16. I remember taking the medication, and the issue that I'd had with the medication was actually the doctor that I'd seen. When I went in there, he got a piece of paper. I'll never forget it. I've hated it, so there's no emotion there. When I used to talk about it, I used to cry. But he got a piece of paper and he said, now a normal brain has these chemicals, and this is what the thought pattern does, and it can just take a thought and, move the thought. But your brain doesn't do that. It holds on. And all I heard was your brain, the normal brain and your brain.
And then your brain. Right.
So it was just like confirmation at 16 is there's something wrong with me. And now a doctor in a white coat is telling me this, confirming my biggest fear. Which now as an adult, when somebody does that, when somebody, says something to offend me or to belittle me, I'm like, wow, you've come at me with my biggest insecurity and I didn't die. Cool. It doesn't really bother me anymore. And that's been, a learned experience, as well as having incredible, amazing people around me that share their revelations. And I go, yeah, actually, like I can see that. And so, yeah, I suppose like my teens were really, really difficult. I found alcohol really quite early on. And that was always my vice. And through my 20s, I definitely struggled with alcohol addiction, binge drinking, being drunk most weekends. And, I think there was an element of like society just accepted that. But, I would never have gone to a party sober. There was, at least a bottle of vodka drank before going out, and then continuing to drink once out. So, it was a really testing time. I at 23 had climbed a corporate ladder in the retail industry, and then was like, I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. So I packed up and shipped up overseas, and loved it. Traveled for 2 years, basically straight. Yeah, when I had that, I was like 1 week into that trip, and I had a near-death experience, a drowning, and when I was under...
So you were in Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
What happened?
So again, 23, I don't want to be doing this. I'm taking off. And so first stop was Hawaii. It was like 3 days into the trip, and me and my best mate said, oh, let's go for a swim. This beach looks pretty nice. And so we pulled into Waimea Bay. If there's any surfers, you may have heard of it. And we didn't know it was known for the Quicksilver Surf Pro at that time. And the waves were pretty big, but nothing like bigger than here at Currumbin. They were, it was pretty hot. So we were like, we'll be right. We'll just go around the back and sneak in. And when we got out there, this older gentleman just starts yelling at us, swim out to sea, swim out to sea. There's a set coming. You don't have a board. Are you wearing flippers? Like, what are you doing? Like proper yelling, like how a parent would like yell at their child who's like ran out in front of a car. Like it just, and I went into a full freeze response. My best friend went into a flee response. So she's headed to the shore. I'm like, what do I do? I wasn't the strongest swimmer, and I had major issues with alcohol. We'd been drinking for 5 days straight. And so severely hungover at that point, not a lot of physical strength. And I just get caught in a washing machine, and I'm under that water for 3-4 minutes at a time, back up, back under, and really fighting for my survival at this point. I remember my hands like being on the bottom of the ocean, and thinking that I was swimming up, but I was actually swimming down. And then I remember coming to this place of full acceptance, and I just remember praying, God, if you're real, like just take care of my mum. Like Unfortunately, nobody else crossed my mind, but it was my mum, that I knew that she wouldn't be okay. And in that moment, I wasn't a believer. I knew who God was. I knew I had my brother in heaven. So I kind of knew this. I had this concept of this understanding. But then I saw these beautiful pearly gates, and then this face like stopped me, this face with this long hair, and it said, your life has purpose. He said, it was always meant to be you. Your life has purpose. Your life has meaning. It's not your time to go. It was always meant to be you. Your life has purpose. Your life has meaning. It's not your time to go. In that moment, I was pulled up out of the water and I was on the shore and I was breathing. I didn't need resuscitation. And I remember trying to unpack this. And I remember like the first part was really clear, like it was always meant to be you. And that just like healed something in my soul in that moment. And we didn't have, I was 23. This is, 13 years ago now. We didn't have the world of New Age or anything to even understand or conceptualize what this was. But it was like something in me healed. Like I knew it was meant to be me. That all that fear that I'd had about it was meant to be Josh and I shouldn't have been here. And I used to believe lies like I'd taken my own brother's life. Like it was wild. And so it was like that just wasn't needed anymore. But then I was left with your life has purpose and meaning. And, I was a bit egotistical, thought the world revolved around me. I really hid my anxiety with confidence. I remember then from that point just trying to find my meaning in everything, and that I was purposeful, and I was this like, personality in this like, I could always walk into a room and make myself known, but yeah, it really extended from there. And even when I first found havening, I was this like, oh yeah, like I'm someone, and I matter, and my purpose. And I was always just chasing chasing myself to be greater than what I was. And then the world kind of started to crumble down. I had havening. I was loving havening. 19, COVID had happened. I happened to be visiting my brother in New Zealand, and he invited me to go along to church, and I went. And then I came back to the Gold Coast, and I just continued going. And it was probably about 8 months. And I'd go to church and I was like, this is like free personal development with a sprinkle of Jesus. This is great. Like, I'm going to take these like, TED Talks. And like, I was seeing a change within myself through these messages. Then one day I was really, really deeply struggling within myself. I'd gone through like it's complicated situationship. There had been, cheating on his part, and, again, just parts of myself that hadn't fully accepted myself, and putting up with the bare minimum. And I'm up the front at this church, just bawling my eyes out. I had no idea, it wasn't a religious like place for me. It was, again, like a free personal development where I could go, and middle of COVID when nothing was happening. And then that same face appeared, and the same audible voice and the same words. And it was in that moment, I'm not here to push my beliefs, but it was in that moment where I recognized Jesus as King. And then about 6 months after that, I was recording I used to have a podcast myself, and I was recording the podcast, sharing my story. And I realized that my purpose and meaning is in being a beloved daughter. And so now I don't chase it in worldly things or in other things. I don't struggle with addictions. I just have this peace, even in my business, being self-employed, this, like, it's like, it can come with some real hurdles, but there's just so much peace that I'm constantly provided for. And so it's just, it's a big story, and so many components of self-regulating my nervous system and having tools like havening, being able to breathe when things feel really hard and heavy. I think having my faith has really been the strongest component of them all, because it entwines it all in, combines the mind and the body and the spirit into one, and not being my own God. It's so freeing.
It really is. Oh, Elle, like I'm just smiling and nodding, and I love it so much, because even though my experience with God and developing a relationship with a higher power came in a very different way, it came through a 12-step recovery, and my God, it's a very deep spiritual connection rather than religious, say, but that's not to say that I don't really, I'll go to church with my husband sometimes, and because he does practice more of a religious faith, and I just love it. I like what you said. It's like free therapy or free personal development. You're sitting there getting these epic TED Talks.
Yeah,
Of that.
absolutely.
I feel the same when I go to a 12-step meeting
Yeah.
sometimes. Like there's just so much wisdom and connection that is freely given in those sorts of spaces.
Yeah, that's
and
it.
yet they hold so much. Yeah, exactly. And yet there's so much stigma from those who have never experienced it. So it's, how lucky are we?
Yeah. Well, it's more
that
about
that we got to.
relationship. I had only really ever seen religion myself, and this was the last place I ever wanted to be, if I'm honest. Like I was like, I'll pray the Hare Krishna, like I'll like go to like, ecstatic dance, I'll take the mushrooms. Like I did not want to be one of those people, like a Bible basher. But it's a relationship that you have. When you're in a relationship, just say like with your husband, and you're proud of your husband, you want to tell people about that relationship. And so that's what it is for me. And, it's an undeniable peace that I have in my soul that it's just for me. It's not for anybody else. And even when people are like, oh, can you like tell me? I'm like, no, it's up to you.
Go and experience it.
I can't. If you want a revelation of, the love of God, ask. He won't deny it. But is not somebody like when I was dying, and I think most people would do this in that space. That was the most peace I've ever felt. Sometimes I sit there and I'm like, can you just give me that revelation of like that peace? Like, and it was dying. You wouldn't think it would be there, but it was so most peaceful I've ever felt. But in saying that, it's going, okay, well, my being knew to call out to something that was greater than me. And so when I stopped denying the reality, and it took me, 10 years to get to this place. So, he fought very hard. I was very much in denial because I was, I had this false joy and fulfillment of being my own creator and my own God, which is a wonderful thing. And that it's brought me to where I am. So, yeah, but it is tough.
Yeah, and that piece that you talk about, I really identify with as well. I think that for so long, for me, I used alcohol as a way to fill that God-shaped hole in my soul. And then I didn't know what I was missing until I stepped into recovery and I developed that relationship with, I call it God, but like I said, it feels like a very deep spiritual connection. And it led me into the path of yoga and meditation, and that's sort of where it took me. And I love that it can take, it can be anything to anyone. And it's just like you said, we have a beautiful piece of writing in our 12-step literature that talks about God doesn't make too hard a work of those who seek him. And I think that's what you touched on as well, which, for anyone who's listening along today thinking, oh, like that's just so unattainable for me. I love how you would, it's actually not. You just need to ask. But coming back to that idea of peace, I didn't realize that's what I was actually searching for at the end of the bottle. And now I have that every day, and it is due to this relationship. And it's because I no longer have to control my life. In that handing over, there is peace and serenity, because even when bad things happen now or hard things happen, I always think to myself, well, what's the lesson in this? Like, what is the universe trying to show me? What can I learn? And also, I know I'm going to be okay. And I think that's, for me anyway, that's the difference. Is I lived so much of my life thinking that I had to take control of everything. It was heavy. It was hard. I was exhausted purely from existing because I felt that pressure, which, at the end of the day, I was actually just putting on myself. And yet today, I don't have that pressure. It's a much lighter way to live. And then for me anyway, I've been now open to receive where I'm actually meant to go rather than where I thought I was meant to be going the whole time.
And that's a sense of community, right? And people can find community in so many different places, from your workplace, from, a 12-step program, from, a mum's club, like literally anywhere. I even see the beautiful connections that are made in like the Havening community all over the world. And, we need connection. We're human beings, and that's why I love trauma so much. Not the trauma that happens to us, but I love the fact that we have this ability to understand what trauma does to us, how we can move through trauma, and what actually are the requirements for us to be traumatized. So therefore, we can actually go to the opposite and start building that resilience. And so it's just, it's such I feel like we need a part two. Like, it's such a beautiful, beautiful element to go, wow, we have the information now. When we were children, our parents didn't have the information. 100 years ago, the internet didn't exist. 50 years ago, the internet didn't exist. Like, we are bombarded with information now, but are we utilizing that information? In 5 years, will Google even still be a thing? With the way that AI is moving and changing, there's a lot of things that a lot of things continue to disconnect us, when the one thing that we need as human beings is connection. We need
so
connection.
True. Can you talk just a little bit more about this concept of trauma? A lot of the audience listening along are going to have read a lot of the books and listened to a lot of the podcasts, but specifically childhood trauma. Can you help us understand what is it about childhood trauma that has such a deep impact on our behaviors and the way that we then go on to perceive the world?
There's childhood trauma, and then there's just trauma at any point in time. What I love to explain to people is the work of Ron Rudin, who was a creator of havening, and his understanding and his teaching as to what are the requirements for traumatization. Yeah. So this is at any age, whether you're 2, whether you're 22, whether you're 122, is that for trauma to be encoded, there has to be an event. Something needs to happen. And that event has to be highly emotional for somebody, an individual. That event has to hold meaning. So a specific degree of attachment for the individual. So when we go through something, we attach a meaning to it, kind of like we put a hashtag on it. That made me angry. That hurt my feelings. I felt isolated. I felt abandoned, right? We put a meaning to things. Now, the third requirement in this is that the landscape of the mind at the time is basically based on how we will perceive the event. So the landscape of the mind at the time is required to be in a place of vulnerability. So if we wake up, we're not really having a good day, our boyfriend's broken up with us the night before, and we walk out of the house and we witness something. We witness an event, doesn't even happen directly to us, but we witness something, we can be impacted by that because the landscape of our mind isn't in a place of resilience. It's in a space of vulnerability. So we're either kind of in one or the other. We're feeling really resilient or we're feeling really vulnerable. And that can change throughout the day. Yeah. Hormonal changes and life things can happen. The fourth requirement is that there has to be a level of inescapability, whether that's real or perceived, whether that's I felt trapped, I couldn't leave. So these requirements of there being an event, that event holding meaning, the landscape of the mind being vulnerable, and the sense of inescapability, they're the requirements for trauma. If you look back on all of the experiences that you've had in your life, those 4 components will be there. The good news is that we can go back into that specific event, and through techniques like havening and many others, I specialize in havening, we can permanently change the encoding that's taken place in that event, plus the emotional components that are surrounding it. So for us, when we're looking at why does it change us, well, these requirements are being met. The landscape of a mind of a 2-year-old is pretty vulnerable. Yeah, they can't cook for themselves. If you left a 2-year-old out on the road, what's their survival going to be? Yeah. For myself, when I was 16 and I sat in that doctor's office and he explained that to me, my brain was in a very vulnerable position. My parents had separated. They'd both been remarried. I was 16. I was going through my first breakup. Life was not good, which is why for the next 20 years, I held on to that memory of sitting in the doctor's. It wasn't necessarily traumatic. Yeah. But the requirements that was there, The requirements of trauma were there. So trauma isn't for the first responders and for those that have witnessed or experienced really bad things that would be worthy of going on the news. Trauma are those small significant things that happen to us that are individual to us. That's why when people come and see me and they go, it wasn't really that bad. I don't really think about it that often. Or, I love the ones that come in and go, it was really bad when it happened. I say, well, if there was a scale, 0 to 10, 10 was really bad, high distress, 0 was nothing at all. How does it feel? And they say, well, when I went through it, it was like a 10 out of 10. It was really bad. But, with time, I've done some therapy. It's like a 5 out of 10. I go, okay, so you're at a 5 out of 10 now. How would that feel if it was at a 0? And they don't believe me. We go through the process of the havening technique. I literally have people look under the chair. They're like, they were willing to live with things at a 5, this like, oh, it wasn't as bad as what it was. So I'll accept it that it's like, it's here now. I'm like, it gets to be 0. And that's the renewing of the mind. That's moving through those things and allowing us to truly shift.
Thank you for explaining that. That makes so much sense. And it's for me, there feels like a lot of hope in that, because it means that at no matter what age you experienced the trauma, you have the ability to implement these tools and techniques with the support of a practitioner to be able to give yourself the freedom, the peace of mind, the letting go. We get used to life feeling a certain way. I remember waking up in the height of my addiction, and I was very high functioning. So I was going to the gym, I was going to work, I was doing all the things, showing up for all the events, you can count on me kind of thing. And I felt awful. And I remember it wasn't until I was, well past my first year of recovery that I started to go, oh my gosh, is this actually what people feel like when they're not putting 3 bottles of wine into their system every night? It was like, oh my God, this is awesome. And nowadays it's so funny because I'm so sensitive to things. If I have sugar at night, I won't sleep properly. So we almost recalibrate, don't we? But
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
And that's healing. That
Yeah.
is healing. And, at the same time as healing, we want to be building resilience. Because when we have resilience, that requirement of the landscape of the mind isn't there. So therefore we can go through something traumatic when we don't become traumatized. Because you think about it, you've been through some really awful things. It didn't impact you.
It's so true.
Because of those requirements. Either there wasn't a sense of inescapability. And so inescapability can be, chronic illness. It could be a disability. It could be race. It could be school. I couldn't leave. My parents said that they'd kick me out if I left school at year 10 or whatever it may have been. Sleep deprivation, new mums, this sense of, oh my gosh, it's never going to end, right? It's not just being trapped in a car where you couldn't escape. It's chronic pain, it's relationships.
And even the mental side of it, even just like you touched on beautifully, the perception of I'm trapped. Yeah. Maybe physically you're not, but in the mind, that's what it's telling you. And so therefore it feels as though you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never thought of it like that before. And how, in many ways, I've always thought to myself, my life has gotten better because I stopped drinking, and therefore, my whole world has opened up. But at the same time, in the healing, in the sitting with the stuff, in the processing and doing the work, the resilience is being built. So now when things do happen in my life, they don't have that same weight, and I'm able to handle things with a lot more ease.
That's it.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. Right.
Hey, Elle, can I ask, if somebody's listening along today and, they've read the books, they've listened to the podcasts, maybe they've tried a bit of breath work and meditation, and they still really feel stuck in their trauma, in their stuff, what would you suggest?
It's a really good question. Firstly, Haven. Look into havening techniques, whether it's with myself or any other practitioner. Havening.org has a whole stack. I do meet with people online. I've got a great YouTube video. I get like an email every week being like, your YouTube video has helped me so much. But But secondly, just the reminder that you don't actually have to have it all figured out. You know, sometimes I think when we are on that hamster wheel, we do get a bit hyper fixated on what's the next thing. And that can really cause that fake dopamine. And so for us, it's like, you know, the best thing I tell people to do is to do nothing. And I know it's a bit like condescending, but like, and like, you know, I don't know how I feel about that. One of my favorite quotes from Winnie the Pooh is doing nothing is a great way of doing something. I think sometimes when we can pause in the middle of the mess, we can actually see, okay, what am I trying to control here? And do I need to try and control that? Am I in control of this outcome, or can I just step aside? I recently had a dear friend of mine go through something, and, you know, I was like inquiring to understand their perspective and what it was that they were going through. And then I had to go back and, you know, almost like repent. I was like, I'm so sorry for thinking that I needed to understand your perspective. It's got nothing to do with me. Like, and if you want to share with me, I'm so happy to listen. But I think sometimes either with other people or with ourselves, we can over-involve ourselves a bit too much. And sometimes the answer is, let's do a little bit less. Let's sit in the emotion and actually feel it. It's like I said before, like it's, you know, did you die? Like, you know, it's from my dear friend Sarah Wiseman as I'm thinking about it, and just like going like, you know, if we sit in the emotion, if we actually feel it, it's not going to hurt us. And, you know, feel the emotion and add that very simple havening touch. Sit with it, nurture yourself like you would. If a child was sat on the floor bawling their eyes out, would you just let them sit there and cry? Or would you offer them a glass of water? Or why don't we go kick the football? Or, you know, do you want a hug? We'd offer them something. So do that to yourself. Offer yourself something. Or sit in it.
Yeah, it comes back to that idea of self-compassion, self-nurturing. It reminds me of this awesome quote that I heard, you know, you've survived 100% of your worst days. So it's like, just keep going.
This will pass.
Just keep going.
I love to sit, and I say, it's a quote by Ron Rudin, again, the creator of Havening, you know, I choose to feel safe, peaceful and calm. All is well. All is well. I choose to feel safe, peaceful and calm. That's what our brain wants to know. I'm safe, I can feel peaceful, and I'm choosing to feel calm. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. What a beautiful message to end on. Elle, there's one final question that I have for you, which we finish up with all of our guests here on Behind the Smile. Remembering the version of you who hid behind a smile, I'd love to know the version of you now. What are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
I think prayer would definitely be the first one. Stillness and falling into rest, and community in whatever way that can look like. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Call that friend, go for that cup of coffee, you don't need heaps of people, you just need a few, and really sewing into the lives of other people.
Amazing. So Elle, I know that people are going to want to track you down and learn more about what you have to offer the world. So I'm going to pop all of the links that you've shared with me in the episode show notes, but just for those listening along now, where's the best place they can head to find you?
Yeah, come along to Instagram, shoot me a message, send me a message if you've been listening to this podcast. I'd love to know what you took away from it. That's really the best way, or my email address.
Amazing. I will make sure that I share that in the episode show notes. We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one needs suffer in silence. So thank you so, so much for the incredible work that you're sharing with the world, and for your time and your story that you shared with us today.
Thank you, Ash.